It happened. The Dallas Cowboys have finally signed the free agent. How much will he impact the defense in 2024? We will get to that next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Dallas Cowboys have officially signed an outside free agent, Eric Kendricks from the Los Angeles Chargers, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers for about, 2 days or so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he even got a chance to see the facilities or anything. Yeah, it's great. It's the Cowboys are finally on the board, and with the guy that we had kind of discussed as a potential option as a linebacker for the Cowboys. It just made a lot of sense. I mean, when there was word that he was likely to be released from the Chargers, the history there between Kendricks and Zimmer, the fit, the need, it just made a lot of sense. And so when he got rumored to be signing with San Francisco, it was a little bit surprising because it felt like, at the very least that the Cowboys would have gotten a little bit of an opportunity to kick the tires and sniff the situation a little bit. And apparently they did. Apparently they were kind of quietly still assessing the situation and kicking the tires, even while Kendrick's agent was, entering into a handshake deal or whatever it was that got broken. So, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, we'll talk about it, but just the history of these two together, the need for the Cowboys to just have a veteran presence, and then just his locker room presence in a room that is, especially with if Leighton Vander Esch isn't coming back, is going to be sorely missing.
Yeah,
a veteran presence in it. So we haven't seen numbers yet, but overall a good signing, I think, a solid signing and a good kind of first stepping off point for the Cowboys in free agency.
So first thing on the numbers, I got to assume the number is pretty low. Usually if it's a high contract or a big contract, we see the numbers right away. The longer that we go without seeing the numbers generally means it's pretty low. So we know it's a 1-year deal. If I had to guess, I'm going to say $4 million.
That's probably what I would guess as well.
Around there. We'll check in on that once we get some official numbers. Yesterday morning, I woke up, saw the report from Adam Schefter that he was signing with the 49ers, and I think I tweeted out, I thought it was a lock that he would be joining the Cowboys because of his familiarity with Mike Zimmer and Paul Guenther. Turns out it was. We just had to wait a little bit longer. What does Eric Kendricks still have left? Because I think that's the concern for some Cowboy fans. It's like, yes, it's great that we've signed a linebacker, but it's a 32-year-old. What do you think Kendricks has left?
Sure. But yeah, I think that's the thing is that when I got this and I knew that we were going to be talking about this today, I thought, it'd be kind of helpful to kind of compare and contrast. And I think the player I want to compare and contrast him to is Anthony Barr, his former running mate at Minnesota, who obviously was with the Cowboys, not last season, but the season before that. Right. He is in a much better state now than Anthony Barr was 2 years ago, just because his game, even though he came in as an incredible athlete, certainly for the position, his game is built on instincts and it's built on his vision. And that's a kind of skill set and game that ages very well. I mean, really, you think about like Sean Lee and how, his issue always was injuries. Can he physically hold up? But once he got to 28 or 29, his game, his athleticism plateaued. He didn't really get any more athletic, but he did continue to get better because he continued to be even more knowledgeable, even more instinctual about what's happening. And I think when you watch, Kendricks, listen, part of me is probably a little bit skewed here because I'm pretty sure that I went to the game in which Eric Kendricks had the best game of his season last year. He was absolutely dominant, especially early in that game against Dallas. And I think if you go back and watch, he's still got juice left. He's not the all-pro that he was before, but he's definitely an above-average linebacker. And I would say that he had a better linebacker season last year, and I think PFF probably would back me up on this. He had a better linebacker year last year than any other linebacker who played the entire season. I mean, I think, Bell's grading may be different, than Ben's, but I think on a down-by-down basis on that kind of position at playing in the middle of a defense, I think Kendricks is a upgrade from any linebacker that this team had on their roster last year.
Yeah, so let's go through some of the grades from PFF. Again, I know grades aren't gospel when it comes to players, but it does give us a little bit of a snapshot. I'm going to use some of the stable metrics from PFF. So 91st percentile in missed tackle percentage, still one of the best tacklers that we have in the league.
6% he had last year, something like that, which if you remember, we did the whole list like a couple weeks ago of free agent linebackers. That's about half of what the rest of those free agent linebackers had. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. 90th percentile coverage grade when passes are thrown within 3 seconds. Still absolutely fantastic there. 81st percentile coverage grade with pressure. Got to assume the Cowboys are going to get a lot of pressure this year, so that's really good. Coverage grade in box, 80th percentile. Coverage grade overall, 67th percentile. Run defense grade. Now, this is what slipped a little bit over the last couple of years. 52nd percentile. Run stop percentage, 50th percentile. But the one thing that really is interesting to me is that as Eric Kendricks has gotten older, he's actually become a better pass rusher. 88th percentile when it comes to pass rush grade and pass rush win rate. And we know in Mike Zimmer's defense, those linebackers are going to rush a lot. So overall, I think at worst, he is still an average linebacker, right? The Cowboys would have loved to have an average linebacker at the end of the year last year. And I've got to assume that there's probably going to be a little bit of a decline, but maybe going back to Mike Zimmer's defense will help that decline slow a little bit. But an average linebacker for a defense that desperately needs it, I'm in.
I'll tell you this, like, I think he's above average, and I think we're being fair just to not kind of make sure that, Cowboys fans expectations are to the moon here.
Yeah.
But I'll say this. I mean, the guy has played close to 1,000 snaps, like, for 7 straight years almost. Hasn't missed any significant games. The guy produces. Like, he's averaged over 75, over 80 tackles a year for 7 years, and so I mean that the bottom line is that the guy will produce and he will be a productive player for you. And I think one of the other things I always like to check when you're dealing with veterans that you're signing, right, that are on the decline, that are on the back ends of their career, how are they playing by the end of the season, right?
Yeah.
And for Kendricks, two of his very best games came at the second to last and last game of the year,
despite the Chargers being a dumpster fire at that point. Remember, that's when they were losing to the Raiders 63 to whatever it was.
Yeah, and one of those games was against the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs too. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this Kendrick signing, because I don't feel like we're in a situation where we got a guy who is actively falling off a cliff. It's a gentle decline in his career. I think if anything, he could probably play another two years solid football and still kind of maintain this level of skill.
Yeah, so we're very excited about the addition of Eric Kendricks, but I want to talk about the impact that he's going to have on the linebacker room that the Cowboys have right now, and whether or not they're going to draft a linebacker high in the 2024 NFL draft. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insights from MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, Lana, let's talk about the Cowboys linebacker depth chart right now, because you've got Eric Kendricks, who I'm going to assume is going to be one of your starters. Then it's Damone Clark. It's DeMarvion Overshown, who the Cowboys took in the 3rd round last year. It's Marquise Bell, if you consider him a linebacker. And then not much else, because we anticipate the Cowboys eventually moving on from Leighton Vander Esch one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at that and it's like a solid kind of middle class of linebackers, right? Like, I think we talked about Kendricks, obviously. I tend to think that I haven't completely, washed my hands yet of Damone Clark. I still think he has a upside here. I think he still can improve. We're going to go into year 3 here which I think is, a key year for him. And honestly, I think the signing of Kendricks is going to be absolutely massive for a guy like Damone Clark, right? I mean, I think having Leighton Vander Esch here in the previous years was massive for him as well. And I think having Clark, who is a little bit closer to a kind of the athlete, having Kendricks was a little bit closer type of athlete that Clark is, could really even help, move that along even further. DeMarvion Overshown is really the kind of unknown here. We just don't really know what we're getting here. We saw a little bit of what he could do in training camp last year and in off season, and that was impressive, and that got your mouth watering to see exactly what he was going to do in the regular season. Unfortunately, he had an ACL injury. We'll see how he recovers from that. I think from what I've heard, he should be back for training camp and all that. So but still, it's an unknown quantity, to say the least, right? You kind of have an idea. You're not sure if he's going to be ready to kind of take a starting spot, though, after dealing with an entire season, recovering from an ACL injury. And then Bell, I think we've talked about as well. Like, I think there's a role on this team for Bell. I think that he needs to be, playing snaps.
Yeah.
I think the question becomes, how do you deploy him? Is it in a nickel linebacker situation? Is it a will linebacker? Is it as a safety? So I don't know that right now I would, and frankly, Parsons, right? I would count him almost like Parsons, right? Where I would use him as a linebacker, but I don't know that I would count on him as one of my numbers in linebacker when
it's weird. Yeah. It's like when we do our depth chart, like, we're not going to put Parsons at linebacker, but you can expect like 10 snaps their game.
He's going to play more snaps at linebacker than the guy that's like 3rd on the depth chart.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yes.
So yeah, it's weird, and that's kind of something that we've had to deal with our defenses. And that is part of the issue with having these kind of multiple players, is that, first of all, it's hard to get backups for multiple players. And second of all, how do you account for your depth chart when, you're trying to fit all the game day starters that you need, the game day roster guys? How do you account for backing up a linebacker when you've got a guy that's playing both positions? Do you need to have one player backing up each side of that? So it can make the room a little bit confusing. But having said all that, I still would not be shocked if the Cowboys drafted a linebacker, in the draft. Simply because I think you could easily tell yourself that Bell is a safety, and you just don't know what you're going to get from Overshown. I think that it's one of those situations where you hate to do it 2 years in a row because you spent a 3rd round pick on Overshown. But I think a late day 2 pick on a linebacker isn't the worst idea, especially in a defense that is probably going to be putting a lot more onus on the linebackers than the previous defense did.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the linebackers in this class because it's not a great linebacker class. You have two guys at the top in Edgerrin Cooper and Junior Colson, who I think most people widely expect to go in the first 55 picks or so. There's the wild card who is Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from North Carolina State, where if he was fully healthy, he's probably a first round pick.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me if he goes to the, third day of the draft because
The Cowboys in the second round.
Well, yeah, that's another point. We should mention that Texas A&M had their pro day today. Edgerrin Cooper, who is widely viewed as the top linebacker in this class, he said that he's going to have a top 30 visit with the Cowboys. Not surprising at all. I don't know if he's somebody the Cowboys would draft at 24, but I also can't completely dismiss it either because Eric Kendricks is on a 1-year deal, right? Damone Clark, I think, is a depth piece. You've got Overshown coming off the injury, and we said Marquise Bell might be a safety. Cooper is somebody who checks a lot of boxes from SEC production, outstanding production in college. He's an outstanding athlete, tested in the 93rd percentile. I could see a scenario where if the Cowboys feel like they get wiped out in round 1, Cooper is somebody that they feel like fits this defense really well and can contribute right away.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think linebacker at 24 is a little bit rich for me, but
So do I, just to be clear.
I mean, I could see them talking into this. I mean, again, I think in a normal year, I would feel okay with it. I think this year it's rough, right? Because there's a lot of talented players at the top, right? And so,
but I also could see, Landon, I could see a situation where they get an offer to go from 24 down to 32. Maybe the Chiefs trade up for a receiver, and that's when you get your linebacker.
That's a different situation. I think I agree with you there. If you're able to pick up another pick and move back, then I don't care who you pick at 32. I mean, like, as far as like, it doesn't for me, it doesn't need to be a money 5 position. It doesn't need to be a position. I don't, I'm willing to pick positions that I wouldn't normally pick in the first round once I'm out in the back 5 of the first round, right? Like that makes sense to me. So if you wanted to get a Colson or if you wanted to get a Cooper, I mean, I think both of those guys are different linebackers from each other, but I think both of them you could make fit for different reasons for sure. And obviously the Cowboys still have a need here. And obviously we still need to see who would be there at 32. If I would have a hard time picking Cooper if Jackson Powers, Johnson fell down to 32 or whatever. So, but yeah, I think, or Barton, like I tend to think that the offensive line pick probably is more important than the linebacker in the first round. But if all those guys are gone, all things being equal, and you really like Colson or Cooper, especially after a trade back, I think that's pretty palatable.
Who do you like better between Barton and JPJ, by the way?
I like JPJ simply because I think I love Barton's mentality. I love his tenacity. I love the fact that he can play across the line. You can really put him, if you needed to, at any of the 5 spots. I really do believe that. But I just think having a 320-pound center that plays the way that JPJ does with technique and an ability to recover that, unlike ways that you don't normally see any center, much less a 320-pound center recover, that's to me that's a trump card. I need that on my offensive line.
I like JPJ a lot. I'm a Barton guy, but I'd be happy with either. Last thing on the linebackers before we move on. It's weird. I wouldn't be opposed to the Cowboys drafting a linebacker in the first 2 days of the draft, but I don't necessarily think they have to come out of the draft with one, because I don't think they necessarily need numbers. What they need is a starter, right? That like a guy that can come in and be an upgrade over Damone Clark and Marquise Bell. You're just not going to find that guy probably on day 3, or probably, to be honest, you're probably not going to find that guy in round 3 either. So if they don't draft a linebacker, I'm okay with it. Like, I think they'll be okay.
This is a phenomenon that we've discussed in previous years before too, right? Like, sometimes when you're drafting, you're trying to improve the top end of the room. And sometimes you're just trying to add numbers. And those are 2 different things, right? So, and I think you laid it out perfectly. The Cowboys are going to get a linebacker. They're going to want somebody that is better than all the guys that they've got, or an improvement on all the guys that actually moves the needle at the top. They don't need to add numbers here. They're not short a linebacker. They can go and sign another free agent linebacker if they're just looking to fill out the room, or just draft a guy in the 5th or 6th round if they're looking for a body, right? But I agree. Like, I think there is value in drafting a top end linebacker that can improve the room, but at a certain point, I don't feel the pressing sensation of needing to draft a linebacker goes away, because it's not a numbers game; it's a talent issue. And if you're drafting a guy in the middle rounds, you're not really adding to the talent to the point where it becomes a priority. It's more just like, okay, well, at a certain point, linebacker falls off into the pile of other needs. That's it's equal to the rest of them if we can't add a starter level talent at the position.
All right, so let's talk about the rest of free agency for the Cowboys, because now that they got that first move out of the way, we're going to see a whole bunch of
floodgates
moves, right?
Open, right? It's just nothing but free agent signings from here on out, I'm sure.
Probably not, but we'll discuss it coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date from your first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Landon, let's talk about some potential additions that the Cowboys could make over the next couple days. This is usually when the Cowboys start to get involved in free agency once the first, second, third wave happens. What do you expect to happen now?
Well, yeah, I think you nailed it, right? Like, now that they've kind of got that first one in the books, they will start kind of looking at the lay of the land a little bit and see, what is available to them, what's kind of in their target zone, right? Like, because they're very much going to spend basically based on, value. Like in free agency, they are going to want to spend efficiently. They're going to want to spend and get good bang for their buck. So, we all know the positions, right? Like, it's running back, it's defensive tackle. There's offensive line in there, whether that's center or tackle at this point.
Edge rusher.
I think all of those spots are going to be targeted. So I think, continue to look at some of the center names to see if maybe they want to avoid having to kind of get into that situation. The thing that's interesting, we always talk about, right, is like when there is a specific a deep group in the draft, there's one of two ways to attack that, right? You can lean into that knowing that you want to take a player in that position group, and then just know that you can hit that position on the second round, third round, fourth round because of the depth, right? Or you can sign a free agent center, fill that need, and then use all that dearth in that position as ways to push players that you want down to you, right?
Yeah,
I tend to think that the Cowboys will likely wait until the draft and try to sign a center.
You're saying
I just don't think
the draft.
What'd you say?
You said
I'm sorry. No, I meant wait until the draft to draft a center. I think.
Yeah.
Because I think if they don't, because I just think that the talent difference in the free agent market will be the same before and after the draft at this point. There's just not a huge name mover, a big mover in the center.
Well, especially now that all these guys have got signed, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but I wonder if they believe that Brock Hoffman is a similar player to the guys that are available, and he's cheaper.
Yeah, or TJ Bass, right? Or
TJ
combination
Bass,
of it, right? Like, exactly. I think that that's fair, right? At a certain point, the market becomes like, oh, wait, how much better is this center now versus where we could get TJ Bass by the end of the offseason or get Brock Hoffman by the end of the offseason, right? But that's why I think that at the center position, they're probably going to draft. I think that because of this whole way that this Tyron situation has gone down, I wouldn't be shocked if they signed a free agent tackle. And honestly, like the timing of this, I'm still, and I've said this in the beginning, I'm still not ruling out Tyron Smith coming back because this has now been 2 days as this has gone on. We haven't heard a peep about him taking a visit, about him, teams are interested with Tyron Smith, blah, 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 blah. So I'm still holding out hope that that part gets resolved because I haven't really heard anything otherwise. So I would say even if they don't sign Tyron for, that I think tackle is another position that, we still haven't seen Trent Brown signed. We still haven't seen some of these other guys signed yet. So there are still options out there if they wanted to get in front of that, as opposed to, listen, there's lots of tackles in this draft, but I just feel like if you're taking a tackle in the first round, you're taking tackle 4 or 5 or 6, at 24. So there may be better results by trying to find a way to get a tackle in free agency and then taking something like center or, one of these other positions we talked about in the first round.
I agree with you. I think tackle is probably the next position that they're going to address, whether it's Tyron, which is obviously what we both hope happens. Maybe that's when you sign Chuma Udoga back, and let's say Tyron leaves and goes to Kansas City. Just throwing that out there. Maybe you bring back Udoga or the equivalent of a Chuma Udoga. And I still think running back is one where they would like to sign somebody. We talked about A.J. Dillon yesterday. He's still out there. And I think every day that goes by, I think the price continues to drop on, a player like Dillon or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The only other position that I'm going to mention is corner.
I was just
We've seen basically no movement on cornerbacks in free agency. We saw Chidobe Awuzie got a decent deal, and then that's basically been it. Like Kendall Fuller is still out there, Stephon Gilmore is still out there.
Jalen Johnson signed his huge deal, but I think that's not. I don't know if they even count that really.
No, but I mean, like the guys that are available, like Jordan Lewis, still waiting on a deal. Miles Bryant, Adoree Jackson. I think the Cowboys would like to bring in one veteran corner to at least cover their bases a little bit in case Trayvon Diggs isn't healthy, whether that's Gilmore or whether that's somebody else like Jordan Lewis. I got to assume that that's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, the market for this cornerbacks has been weird the last 2 seasons, really.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of all over the place. So it's a little bit. It's interesting. It's interesting that all the teams are kind of sitting on their hands in that market right now. And just I think everyone's kind of waiting to see who's going to set the market for like the kind of starter level corner, and then then I think everyone's spending will probably fall around that.
I 100% agree. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.